I'm going to do a clip in just a minute on like a warning that the guys at Get Up gave the Ravens about this move. And I really want to have that conversation before we do that, because now we're going to take a step back. We've really gotten into the weeds of what he can do for this team. So on Colin Cowherd, they had an immediate reaction, then had a big statement of what it means for the Ravens. And then we'll transition over to the warning that Get Up is giving the Ravens after they traded for Diontae Johnson. But here's Colin Cowherd and his reaction on his show as soon as it happened.
Johnson has just been traded to the Baltimore Ravens. The Carolina Panthers are sending Diontae Johnson to the Baltimore Ravens. So Kansas City goes out, gets an edge rusher, and D-Hop. Baltimore says, okay, we'll play that game. We'll go get a better receiver, Diontae Johnson. So the Carolina Panthers, the New England Patriots, they're moving off players at the trade deadline. Kansas City's adding them. Baltimore is adding them. What do you think, J-Mac? I mean, it's the rich get richer.
Buffalo, KC, Baltimore. That is a really awesome race in the AFC.
Okay, so one got D-Hop, one got Diontae Johnson, and one got Amari Cooper. Baltimore, Buffalo, and Kansas City all added a B-plus level receiver.
Rank the teams for me right now, those three. They're clearly
Kansas City won. Buffalo, Baltimore's a coin flip. Baltimore's defense on the back end worries me.
So the Ravens had a great group of receivers last year, remember, with Odell Beckham and company. Yeah. They have now upgraded their skill position players with Derrick Henry. They got the young kid.
Zay Flowers.
Bateman actually showing okay despite the drop off the face mask this weekend. And now you're adding Diontae Johnson, who was a 1 or 2 in Pittsburgh last year.
You already got a Mark Andrews at tight end.
Mark Andrews likely the backup.
Yep.
They got the kid Mitchell, the young running back who's been on the PUP list all year. I got him stashed in fantasy.
Listen, they're saying we can't solve our defense. We'll make our offense better in
Baltimore. The Ravens
Baltimore.
have the best skill position players in the AFC. Who's got better?
No, you're right.
The depth-wise.
No, quarterback, running back, tight end, receivers, Baltimore's number one, arguably in the league.
And Buffalo's second in the AFC to Baltimore.
Okay, two comments I want to get your reaction on. He said Diontae was a better trade than D-Hop. Thoughts?
Diontae was a better trade than D-Hop. I think Kansas City was more desperate for a wide receiver. They needed to make that move. And so out of necessity, I think that was more of a need. What was more
I could see D-Hop having more production in Kansas City than Diontae Johnson here, for sure.
For sure.
But what's crazy, because that comment stuck out to me, and I was like, well, let me go look at his look. Okay, so first I went to get his numbers, and I went to PFF because they have grades. So Diontae Johnson has higher numbers for sure. DeAndre Hopkins has 17 receptions for 202 yards and 1 touchdown. We had Diontae Johnson's up on the screen earlier, but I know he has 3 touchdowns. I think he was like in the 300-yard range.
So far this year, Deontay's numbers are 7 games, 30 receptions for 357 and 3 touchdowns.
Yeah, he's got more production for sure. Then I went over to PFF, and they're basically graded almost identical. I just
can't quite get over that.
At first, I thought it was a crazy statement, and I still don't know that I completely buy it. But after looking at it, I was like, maybe it's not as crazy as I thought. Although I do think he's going to have a bigger impact in Kansas City because I think he'll have more opportunity for one.
For sure,
Yeah.
I can't get quite past J-Mac Collins, co-host, putting Baltimore and Buffalo in the same category. Record-wise, sure. But after watching that head-to-head Sunday night, it's hard to do that.
Yeah.
but I get it.
That was obviously before
Amari Cooper was brought in and before
and Coleman
Buffalo's
is
kind of
flourishing.
The Bills have hit their stride. I get that. But having watched, maybe we're a little bit biased with that, having watched that Sunday night stomp down,
What about the statement of the Ravens have the best skill positions in the AFC on offense?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't even think Diontae Johnson changes that. I think that could have been true before that.
Yeah.
I think Diontae Johnson, again, gives you depth and gives you flexibility in terms of 11 personnel, but I don't know that he necessarily makes it so now they do. It's like before you already had the MVP, the 2-time MVP. You already had Derrick Henry. You already had probably the best tight end group in the league. And then you have an above average wide receiver core? Are we good with that?
I don't know if I'm there yet.
Average?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Going into the year, they were below average, so I'm happy to make them average right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people in the live chat, or at least some in the live chat.
Yeah.
I would just caution you, for those of you who think that D-Hop is washed, we've seen this movie before.
Mm.
You have to throw out the statistics. You have to throw out what you've seen on tape in other situations. He is going to the Mecca of where wide receivers flourish. So I would just caution you guys that those of you who are writing D-Hop off because of what you've seen from him lately doesn't necessarily mean that's what you're going to get from him right now in Kansas City.
Okay, now on to the warning. So let's talk about this. Let's see what you think about this. This is they were talking about the move on Get Up this morning. A lot of people echoing what we're saying. Free trade basically gives you depth. They also said that they felt like the Ravens had the best offense in the AFC. But then Jeff Saturday and Mike Greenberg have a warning, and I want to see what you think about this.
What is our concern about the Ravens offense with the addition of Diontae Johnson?
Don't lose your identity. 3 wide receivers ain't your identity. Make sure you keep Ricard playing his play, the 2 tight ends being in the game. If Johnson's coming in and you want to take Bateman out, great. Let's do that thing. What you don't want to fall into if you're the Baltimore Ravens is trying to get into track meets. The issue for the Ravens is when they played in the AFC Championship game, they dropped back 82% of the time. Their backs touched it 6 times. You brought Derrick Henry in for a certain style of football. Stay consistent to that identity.
But I don't think that 11 personnel necessarily messes up their identity. And you don't want to get in the trap of fighting yesterday's war. Like, them having this other receiver adds flexibility. Just because the reason why they lost last year was because they didn't stick to the run doesn't mean that when they come up with an opportunity this year that the best move isn't to spread it out, particularly with how well Lamar Jackson is playing. And also, if you put Derrick Henry in the backfield, you bring in another receiver, that brings in a DB, and that makes a linebacker leave. As a DB, you know what I don't want to see? I don't want to see Derrick Henry. You get all those tight ends in there, and you got big body guys against Derrick Henry. So
listen, I do love that. The problem is that don't fall in love with just the passing the game, because you and I know when 3 receivers get in and you start, all of y'all get the same way.
Why you hating on
this little side of the table, brother, they all get excited. Oh, look at this matchup. Oh, look at this matchup. You see that 250-pound grown man in the back? That's the matchup I want. At that matchup.
You're not wrong. This isn't a move that will change the identity of the Baltimore
That's what I'm hoping.
This is a luxury because they're a good team who had the opportunity to, again,
for cheap,
solidify their floor for cheap. Because when you get in those 3rd and 8 moments, 2 tight ends ain't going to do it. You need man beaters. You need guys who can move the sticks. And those track meets aren't things you get into. They're things you're forced into because your defense seems to can't stop a nosebleed.
Okay, what do you think about the warning not to lose your identity just because you have the personnel to be on there with 3 wide receivers?
Well received. A lot of people still have PTSD from late January of earlier in the year. We all get that. But I think Hawk, the last guy who was speaking there, I get. Is he a former NFL wide receiver?
Yep.
So he's speaking like he was. Hawk is. I think he's spot on. They're adding. The identity will not and cannot be lost because we've seen what the ceiling can be, at least in the regular season over the last month plus. When you stick to your identity, when you stick to what you should have done more of in the AFC Championship game, this just adds. Matter of fact, it adds to their identity. It doesn't take away from their identity. It just, hey, when push comes to shove in the postseason, Sarah, and while teams have not been able to successfully, at least consistently, stop Derrick Henry by stacking the box right through 4 quarters, and then in Cincinnati's case into an overtime period, inevitably when a team is successfully able to do so, and if that happens in January, now you have another weapon where we can beat you outside. So you got to start to honor that as well. And if Diontae can do that consistently in man coverage, as he has done in the past, that's just another layer they can beat you.
Like it's also well received on my part. It's funny because I think it's more than PTSD from the AFC Championship game. I think it was also the Kansas City game. I think it was the Browns game. And with the Browns game, again, 11 carries, and you weren't behind by more than 3 points until the 4th quarter. And so I think that Hawk is 1,000% correct if Monken makes it 1,000% correct. Do you know what I mean?
Sure.
Like in an ideal world, if Monken is pushing all the right buttons, the Ravens are doing exactly what Hawk is saying, which is, listen, if you're forced into a shootout because of your defense, you now have the guys to be able to do that. But to Saturday's point, cool if you're forced in that position, but don't go into the game thinking from the start, I got to be that team. And that's where I think Monken could be tempted to go that route. Like if Monken comes out and we're like late first quarter, or early second quarter, and we go out and throw 3 passes and 11 personnel, I'm not going to be a happy camper, right? Unless they're up like 14-0 already.
Yeah.
But like, so I think it could be an ideal scenario as long as Todd Monken is pushing all the right buttons and isn't tempted to abandon Derrick Henry and the running game prior to when he's forced into it by potentially the defense.